All right, let's get into the process, which looks very well defined and well crafted. It wasn't quite like that. It was a
Mhm.
little bit of figuring out what happens, but let me try to attempt to explain what we did. We definitely had a lot of fun coming up with this. But first, we had to start with having a very identifying a very specific area of research within which we wanted to experiment and build out these personas, right? And when the team first came to me, that I actually didn't have a hard time identifying that at all because having done years of research with dashers, especially in the earnings area, we already knew and we kind of already talked about dashers in this way, that there are segments of dashers, that there are personas of dasher when it comes to how income reliant the dasher is on DoorDash, right, as a means of income. So there are sort of three distinct personas that exist. This is a bit simplified, but there's a dasher who relies a fair amount on income from dashing. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's a dasher who only dashes occasionally and hence does not rely that much on income from dashing, probably has income from other jobs or other gig jobs or whatever. And then there's a spectrum of everything in between, which we're sort of calling as the dasher who somewhat relies on DoorDash, right? So keeping sort of those personas in mind, we said, okay, can we build out those personas? But in order to do that, we had to first start with the curation phase, where we ended up collecting a ton of data that we already had, right? So what did we already know about dashers and their income reliance on DoorDash? We had years of firsthand data. There were videos from interviews, there were transcripts, there were research project notes, there were presentations, slide decks, memos, all of that. Then we also worked with our data scientists to get behavioral data. So I identified a ton of different behavioral sort of expressions that we see from these dashers based on their segments. So what is their hourly dashing income? What are the total number of hours per week that these different types of dashers would spend dashing? Are there patterns in that? Are they dashing mostly on the weekdays, mostly on the weekends, mostly lunchtime, mostly dinner time, or what is it? What is their acceptance rate of the orders that DoorDash gives them? So tons of behavioral data got appended to this. We had some demographic data, not a ton, but we knew a little bit about who dashes, men versus women, where they live geographically, because we knew where they live as in where they dash, I mean. Part-time versus full-time. We had some age data. We also had some data from social channels. So I'd say Reddit and Facebook are the primary communities where dashers are really active. So now we have all of these different sources of data, curated all of these years of data, and that's what took us into the training phase, because all of this data had to be ingested, and then the intelligent personas could be created based on this, right? And then not too long after that is when we began the testing phase. The four functions that primarily carried us through the testing phase, functions as in like job functions at DoorDash, were research, product design, product management, and data science. Those I would say are the primary functions. Richard, you want to carry us on through what we did after that?
Yeah, I mean, as Priya just described, we're talking about a an iterative process, right?
Mhm.
That at the end of that process of creating these personas and validating them, we had personas that we felt were strong and relevant to what DoorDash is trying to do. But we also know that longer term, this really requires sort of a continuous enrichment process. It could be that your research, the research plans that you have for fiscal year 26, you can continue to use that data to train up the personas so that they're relevant and they're timely. Um, but in addition, you want to bring in contextual data. We were talking at one stage of the pilot about the fact that no tax on tips is sort of a relevant new phenomenon, that we need to be able to factor into how personas think. Um, and you want economic and market conditions that are up to date, cultural trends as they unfold. So that continuum, ensures your simulations don't just launch strong and relevant, but they stay strong and relevant.